Welcome back to 1% Weekly, the program that helps you either get into the 1% or to stay there against all the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that seem to be coming our way. In this episode, we're going to look at the complete and utter disaster that was the Australian company Wesfarmers' takeover of the Homebase group. We're then going to find out just how financially illiterate our children are. And then we're going to talk about how those nice people at HMRC would like us to make tax digital. If you want a good example of the hubris that can sometimes come with a takeover, you need to look no further than Australian group Wesfarmers' recent escapades around Homebase. They have cocked it up royally. They paid something like $340 million for the chain as it was. It immediately started losing money, and the first thing they did under their kind of tender loving care was to fire 160 of the management team. So suddenly, almost all the knowledge of the business and how it ran was taken away at a stroke. It was kind of like, we know best, we're big in Australia, you lot get out the door, do not collect go, do not collect £200, here's your belongings, let's call security. That was their kind of approach to HR management. Then they decided, nah, we don't like the way these stores are laid out. They've got all this soft furnishing stuff at the front as you come in. Get rid of all that. Obviously what the Brits want are power tools and big barbecues. So let's put in multi-thousand-pound Australian Barbies. Let's put in all those big power tools. That's what they'll go for. Never mind the soft toys. Only they didn't. And suddenly the sales started plummeting, and then they started doing all kinds of alterations. They started rebranding, some of them and not others. We've got one near us that became a Bunnings warehouse, it's apparently what they're called in Australia. And then they started just chopping and changing all the layouts and everything else. So it was an unmitigated disaster. So what have they decided to do now? They've decided to sell it for the princely sum of £1. Oh, but there'll also be another few $100 million of costs involved in the process, things to do with pensions and other, leases they've got to get out of and whatever else. So they have lost close to $1 billion on this project. It's an absolute disgrace. At the moment, it would appear they've got away with it. It looks like none of their senior management have been fired. Their shareholders' capital and funds have been set fire to and just burnt up and gone up in smoke. They have lost, how many years' profit must that be? $1 billion. And all because they assumed that the Brits would be exactly the same as the Australians. They did no consumer research. They asked for no local input or advice. They fired all the people who knew the local market and thought they knew best. Well, I'm kind of glad they've got their comeuppance, because they frankly deserve to fail. But the result of it is that the whole business is now back in recovery mode. It's been acquired by a group called Hilco Capital, who are turnaround experts, and they're saying basically it's going to be back to the future. They're going to reinstate the products and the layouts that were there before and get the whole group back to profitability. So. Yeah, okay, well there you go. You often talk about how you can acquire companies cheaply. One way is to look for a big, arrogant corporation that's bought a business, made a complete mess of owning it, and then just wants to escape and lick its wounds. You can pick it up for a bargain, turn it around, and maybe make some real money. You'll often hear me banging on about the lack of financial education in this country. Well, I think it was rather brought home to me by a recent survey by Halifax, the bank or building society as I kind of think of them. They actually just recently surveyed something like 1,700 young people aged between 8 and 15. And they asked them some fairly basic prices. One was, what's the price of a pint of milk? Their response? £17? No, it's about 44p. They asked them the price of a loaf of bread. £15? No, that'll be £1.06. How could they be so far wrong? Well, actually, I can understand it because they never get to handle money. They never get to buy stuff, look at the prices, see what change they get and all the rest of it. If anything, they probably just see people using a contactless card. They just go bleep and that's the thing paid for. Or they use an app on their phone. You see, when I was a lad back up there in the frozen north, you used to be sent to the shop on an errand for your mum with a list of things to get and some money to pay for them. And you had to come back with not just the stuff, but you had to come back with a receipt and the change. You know, she was fairly smart. She wasn't going to let me just pocket the difference. So I got to see that I paid a pound, I got the milk, and I got this much change, and I brought it back. So I got used to the idea of handling money, of seeing the price of something, getting the change, and kind of, I suppose, an introduction to concepts of budgeting and stuff like that. But today, children don't get exposed to that. We live in an increasingly cashless society where everything's done automatically by touch and by app and so on, or the bills are paid by direct debit or whatever. So there's a huge gap in our children's financial education around money. So what should we do about this? Well, I think the simplest way is to return to the old ways and give physical pocket money and tell them that they've got to manage it, so that they actually have to come up with a bit of a budget. They've got to save a bit, they spend a bit and all the rest of it. Get them used to handling money, get them used to also what you have to pay. Give them a look at the family budget. They'll be shocked and horrified to see what you have to pay in council tax or electricity or in Sainsbury's bills, but get them used to it at a relatively early age. I'm sure this also lies behind some of the problems of university students who come out with 30, 40, 50,000 pound debts, because it's all funny money on the card, on the student loan. It doesn't feel like they're spending their own money. I could say the same about some CEOs of companies who are spending shareholders' money like it's going out of fashion. I shan't mention Wesfarmers again, but this is all part of the same problem, the same illness. People are financially illiterate, and the next generation looks like being worse than the current generation because of all the movement in technology that is taking them further and further away from the concept of money. I recently spent some time looking at gold in one of the top gold brokers in London, and of course gold is not just an investment or an insurance policy, it's money. And you can actually buy things like Britannia coins, and you can use them as both an investment and as money. And because they're viewed as legal tender, there's no capital gains tax to pay on them when they go up. So maybe the motivation for getting your kids to learn more about finance is that you'll get them one of these gold Britannia coins as a reward when they show you that they can manage their own money, they understand the value of things, they understand the price of things, and they're actually equipped to deal with living in 21st century Britain. Not only do we have the most complicated and longest tax code in the world, we now have to cope with some new changes being introduced by HMRC over the next couple of years if we are in business. It's called Making Tax Digital. Now you may think, okay, I already do my tax return online, self-assessment and all that sort of thing, but this is going a lot further. This means having all of your tax records online, so that everything to do with your bookkeeping and your accounting and your tax procedures and so on has to be in a form that can be read and understood by those nice people at HMRC. The first phase that's coming in for next year is all around VAT. So if your business is turning over 85,000 or more, so you're above the VAT threshold, then you must be in a position to do a digital tax return every month starting April next year. So yeah, it's another little thing to be aware of, but the next stage after that is your entire corporation tax affairs will have to be in a digital format acceptable to HMRC. That's going to come in probably by 2020 unless they delay it again. It was all meant to happen this year, but clearly people weren't ready, so it got delayed for 12 months. Now, if your accountant is half decent, they should already be talking to you about this. In fact, this is a great way of testing whether your accountant is half decent or not. If they're not being proactive in coming to talk to you about what you need to do to make tax digital, maybe it's time that you looked at a change, because these are the sorts of things that can catch you out. If you don't get ready for this and plan for this, the chances are, especially if you've been running your business on Excel spreadsheets, you're going to have to invest in one of the software packages that is HMRC compliant. And that means time to acquire it, implement it, learn it, have your staff know their way around it, test it out, and so on. And you know, next April will come up faster than you ever imagined, just like that little thing called GDPR crept up on us recently in May of this year. So here's another thing to put on your to-do list. I know, in between trying to run the business, you love working for the government. So here's another little thing that you can do for them. Just make sure that you've got the right compliant software and you get it all put in place, tried and tested in time for next year. Frankly, I would go beyond the VAT piece. You might as well do this as a single project, get the whole thing, including corporation tax, ready to go. And I think there is an upside to it, let's be honest. It's not just admin for the government. It does mean that you can be more on top of your business and your numbers, because in order to be able to provide the right tax numbers for HMRC, you're also going to have all your revenue and expenses and profit numbers sorted out. And most businesses simply don't do that, or at least they don't do it often enough. They might do it once a year when the accounts are due, but the reality is you should be doing these kind of accounts every single month. How else can you stay on top of your business? How else can you know if you're making money? When we had our recent boardroom breakfast at Mercedes-Benz in Brooklands, a lovely venue, I had Jeff Lermer, our resident tax expert, go through a whole new approach to accounting that really helps you to be on top of your numbers, but also to increase your profits by changing the structure of how you do things. Do get in touch if you want to learn more about that, but I've started implementing it within the elite group. I'm already seeing some significant benefits from it. But one of the things that you've got to recognize is that kind of benefit can only come from being on top of your numbers. And so let's use the Making Tax Digital initiative as a way of actually removing all excuses for why we haven't done this already, and let's get to a point where every single month we can produce management accounts for our revenue, our expenses, our profit, and of course, the tax that's due to HMRC. I've talked already about financial illiteracy. Well, a couple of years ago, University College London analysed the money views of 15,000 people. They found out that they were 7 times more likely to talk about the number of sexual partners they'd had, or even if they'd had a sexually transmitted disease, than they were to talk about money. So I rest my case. This is obviously the ultimate taboo. People would rather talk about STDs than finance. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching 1% Weekly. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, you might want to click here to subscribe for future episodes, or you might want to click here to watch this other video. What are you waiting for? My arms are getting tired.